weeks explaining that it was full of randoids, things like that. There's one more sort of aspect to mutualism which I found quite attractive, and that is that it offers a mechanism as well as this ideology. And it's, again, I suppose it is it's a close twin to the idea of agorism operating sort of underneath the official economy and so on, and to try and undermine it. But the central idea of mutualism and how to achieve a stateless society is to build institutions to deliver the sort of things that we still agree might need to be delivered in a free market, but without using state mechanisms. So, for example, some of the stuff that I've been working on since the good people of Headington decided they didn't want my services anymore in 2002, is an idea of developing affordable housing using a mechanism where you bring the landowner into the cooperative structure with the occupiers, and in the end the landowner gets fair value for his land, but it isn't costing us the same amount up front, so we can afford to develop the houses, get people in while they're earning very little, and make it part of the deal that as their earnings grow they contribute more, and the landowner eventually gets out with full value, like a little bit like sort of taking a long-term option. So things like that are trying to do without state subsidy, for example. Similar sort of ideas surrounding some of the sort of alternative and local currencies. Can we trade without the taxman getting involved, and things like that, and building those institutions? Funnily enough, one of the courses that I'm on with the C4SS is about the private provision of law enforcement and arbitration and so on. And there are authors who we are using as part of that course who are establishing sort of below the official legal structure and mechanisms for arbitration on a fairly large scale commercial basis in the US. So it's those kind of, let's see how much of this we can build before we can explain it, before everyone else sees that we can do it without the state, and realizes that, you know, we're voting for thugs that we no longer need. Now, I would call that my introduction, but and leave it to a sort of discussion. I don't know how I'm going to fill half an hour of that at the conference in October, but
So
I shall have practiced it more by then.
What would you say mutualism was? Could you put it in if someone asked you what was mutualism, would you?
It's an image of radically free market anarchism, no state, in which the state privilege granted to actually existing capitalism has broken down, and most people would have the wherewithal, if they wanted to be their own boss in the sense of self-employed, and that of course means that those corporation type organizations that we have at the moment can be much less exploitative, if they are exploitative, because a huge proportion of labour have got their own means to see themselves through and be able to say, no, I'm not going to settle for a bad deal. I'm going to, you're either going to pay me properly or, give me decent conditions. It's that. And in a sense, why mutualists? Because they see larger projects. I mean, obviously, not everything can be done by individuals working on their own as small-scale producers. Although it has to be said, I mean, it does have quite a lot with, it does share quite a lot with I won't say the eco movement, because that's not what I mean. I mean the sort of small-scale production movement, which regards a lot of the helter-skelter rush to production of actual existing capitalism because of things like inflation and debt that they're forced into and taxation that is taken off them. They all have to produce more and more in order to be able to survive that predation. So it would see small-scale production as more prevalent in a mutualist society, but nevertheless large-scale projects would be perhaps temporary vehicles of confederations of self-employed or co-ops established for that purpose. But as I say, that's not to take away that we're talking about anything coercive. I mean, we're talking about a free market in which any of these structures would compete against each other, and if we're right, then the co-ops will win, and if we're wrong, then the Hansons will win, or whatever.
Is there any questions or contributions?
There's no actual difference, is there, between these groups as opposed to coercive? They both regard the public sector as the coercive sector,
Yeah.
the private sector as the positive sector. That's the essential difference.
Yeah.
But there is a difference in property rights. Castle says you can only claim what you actually use, and those will claim, well, you can just own this land, it's yours.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that the end result actually works out terribly much different. I mean, one of the stages in my journey that as a Georgist, obviously that was the aim of that was to address the imbalance of property ownership by taxing the economic rent out of it. But actually, when you look at some of Rothbard's stuff about trying to get to the point where all property was justly acquired, and then also not having a state to automatically guarantee your title. I think that within the free market you would be likely to get mechanisms like title insurance companies that would end up pretty close to taxing the economic rent out of a location, in that the number of claims against a particular site is likely to increase as it's more of a popular site, which is the same reason for Ricardian rent to arise. And so in order to defend you against those claims, your premiums are going to be higher on the higher value sites.
Like the internet,
And
like names,
Yeah.
whether that evolved without state, that wasn't state regulated, and you could say that if you wanted to claim this.
I guess so. And that also, we have a situation even now where